Steve Jobs by Anna Crowder. The beginning of Steve Jobs' life was anything but normal. He was born on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, California, to two unwed graduate students who were ill-prepared to take care of him and place him for adoption. He was adopted by Clara and Paul Jobs, who raised him in Los Altos. Even as a young boy, Jobs showed a predilection for electronics. When he was around 12 years old, a neighbor showed him some tricks, like a microphone that worked without an amplifier. This neighbor was a ham radio operator and also happened to be an employee of Hewlett-Packard. Jobs idolized Hewlett-Packard and its founders. Jobs actually called William himself when he was trying to build a frequency counter and needed some parts for it. Apparently, he pressed Hewlett so much that Jobs was given the parts that he needed and a summer job a few years later as an intern. Whether or not Hewlett was impressed or amused, it is unknown, but clearly Jobs made an impression on him from that time. Jobs attended Homestead High School. He graduated in 1972. Upon graduation, he chose to attend Reed College in Oregon. His parents tried to talk him out of it due to the high cost of tuition and board. However, Jobs could not be persuaded otherwise. He only stayed in college for 6 months before dropping out. But before going home, he spent several months sleeping on the couches and floors of several of his friends. Even as a young boy, Steve was being unknowingly groomed for greatness. He recounts the story of when his father asked him to build a fence around their backyard. His father told him that he needed to use just as much care on the back of the fence as the front. Steve replied, "But nobody will ever know." His father said, "But you will know." The moral from the story is that a true craftsman uses a good piece of wood, even for the back of the cabinet against the wall. And for the fence, they should do the same thing. Steve put this piece of information to good use. He applied it to the circuit board inside of the Macintosh. He even demanded that the engineers redesign the circuit board so that the chips would line up neatly and look nice, even though it would not be seen inside the sealed box. Upon returning home from college, Steve rekindled an old friendship with Steve Wozniak, with whom he had graduated from high school. Woz helped Jobs work on projects when he worked for Atari. They both belonged to the Homebrew Computer Club, which was a group of local engineers and hobbyists that got together to bounce ideas off of one another and to swap parts and to discuss new ideas. One of the earlier productions of Woz Jobs, or Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, was a blue box, which is a hacker's term for a device that allows you to make free long-distance phone calls by tapping into the phone system. Next, Steve and Wozniak began putting together something that they could show off to the Homebrew Club. This early invention turned out to be Apple I. It was little more than a motherboard. But creating Apple I placed the idea in Jobs' head that they could improve on this and actually build a better computer than what was out at the time. Officially, Woz and Jobs launched Apple Computer, ironically, on April Fool's Day in 1976. Steve Jobs wanted the next computer to be different from what was already out on the market. He wanted it to be simple enough for anyone to use. He wanted it to be like a common household appliance that we could use in our everyday life. The vision that turned into was the Apple II, which came out a year after Apple I. The Apple II was so great of a hit that it actually powered the company for the next 7 years, including through the first public offering in 1980 and until the release of the Macintosh. After drama with the new CEO of Apple caused Jobs to step down and quit working for Apple, he returned in 1997. At the time, Apple was producing a wide array of products, and they were going under. In a meeting, Jobs told the employees that they only needed to focus on 4 products. He made a table and grouped them with consumer and pro, with the following category of desktop and portable. He wanted only 4 products, one for each of these categories. He instructed that all other products should be canceled so that they could focus working on just those 4 products. Steve Jobs is notoriously known for his leadership style. He was impatient, petulant, and tough, to say the least, with the people around him. But it's said that this behavior came from his passion for perfection and his desire to work with only the best. He acted the way that he did to prevent what he called a bozo explosion, meaning managers are so polite that mediocre people feel comfortable sticking around. Jobs' rudeness and roughness were accompanied by an ability to be inspirational. He infused Apple employees with an abiding passion to create groundbreaking products and a belief that they could accomplish what seemed impossible. An interesting fact is that even though he was abrasive and rude, Jobs' top players tended to stick around longer and be much more loyal than those at other companies, including ones led by bosses who were kinder and gentler. Continuing on discussing Jobs' leadership style, another important facet to look at is his strong belief in face-to-face meetings. To me, this is ironic, given that the man created the iChat and iMessage and countless other ways for people to communicate electronically, but he actually strongly believed in meeting with his team face-to-face. A quote of his says, "There's a temptation in our networked age to think that ideas can be developed by email and iChat. That's crazy. Creativity comes from spontaneous meetings, from random discussion. You run into someone, you ask what they're doing, you say wow, and soon you're cooking up all sorts of ideas." Steve Jobs was a very charismatic leader. His stage presence was even described as mesmerizing. Trip Hawkins, one of Apple's first 50 employees, stated of Jobs, "He knew how to modulate his voice. He always knew how to get an audience in the palm of his hand in seconds, to get them into a story that's emotionally interesting. Then he'd bring his voice down, so people are hanging on every word." After Jobs returned to Apple and began to write the company, he started taking his top 100 team players on a retreat. The very last day of the retreat, he would approach a whiteboard. He would ask, "What are the 10 things we should be doing next?" People would give all of their suggestions and come up with all kinds of ideas, and within the groups, they would finally narrow it down to just a list of 10. Then Jobs would slash the bottom 7 and say, "We can only do 3. Jobs' ability to actually push people to do what they deemed impossible was nicknamed his reality distortion field by his colleagues after an episode of Star Trek. For those who worked close to Jobs, admitted that although this trait was utterly infuriating, it inspired them to achieve extraordinary feats. An example of this ability was when Jobs was designing the iPhone. He wanted the face to be tough, scratch-proof glass. He actually met with the CEO of Corning Glass Company, who told him that Corning had developed a chemical exchange process in the 1960s called Gorilla Glass. Jobs immediately told him that he wanted a major shipment of the glass in the next 6 months. The CEO was dumbfounded and told him that Corning was not making the glass anymore, let alone that they had the capacity to produce a shipment that large. Jobs looked at him and said, "Don't be afraid. Yes, you can do it. Get your mind around it. You can do it." Corning produced and shipped the Gorilla Glass actually in under 6 months. There are those that would argue that Steve Jobs was not a strategic leader. But that's just because his strategy was so different from what other businessmen focused on and continue to focus on. He was solely focused on the quality of the product, not on what it cost, not on how to offset that cost. His intention to make the Macintosh and his other inventions, it was insanely great. He just wanted them to be insanely great. He never spoke of profit maximization or cost trade-offs. He actually says, don't worry about the price. Just specify the computer's abilities. He had a theory that decline happens at companies because the sales guys wind up running the company. The product guys don't matter so much, and then a lot of them just turn off. He states that happened when Scully came in to work at Apple, and it also happened when Ballmer took over at Microsoft. It's been said that Steve Jobs never invented anything in his life, that he saw somebody else's ideas and just decided to improve on them. While that may or may not be true, his true ability was being able to blend product design and business market innovation by integrating consumer-oriented software, microelectronic components, industrial design, and new business strategies in a way that has not been matched. Steve Jobs passed away on Wednesday, October 5th, 2011. The cause of death was determined as complications of pancreatic cancer. He was 56 years old.